Good morning YouTube, welcome to another vlog. It's such a beautiful morning, beautiful spring morning. It is spring. I'm not sure if spring has been officially announced, but it definitely feels like spring. Okay, I'm in an oak woodland and it's stunning here, so quiet and peaceful. It's quite early in the morning, well, not that early, it's gone 8 o'clock, but the sun's only been up for about an hour. Now where I came from, back home, there'd been quite a lot of frost. There doesn't appear to have been any here at all. Or if there was, it's gone now. You see that when I move over there, see the sun catching my face. Now I'm shaded behind the tree that's just here. Today I'm going to try not to cock up my audio. I messed it up last time. I think I forgot to switch either the transmitter or the receiver on at some point. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it on. Now that it's on, just leave it on. Because it records for apparently up to 7 hours on one charge. I'm not going to be here for that long. So in terms of light, there isn't a cloud in the sky. The sun's coming up, it's going to get higher, so it's going to get harsh. So if I want any photographs, I'm going to have to get them within the next hour. After that, I think that there's quite a lot of shadows now, and the sun's sort of at eye level as you look across. So I need to work quick and find stuff to photograph. I don't feel like working quick because it's so beautiful here. I just feel like sitting on one of these rocks and just enjoying it for a while. Okay, today's video I'm going to talk to you about what lenses you should have as a landscape photographer. So if you're just starting out in landscape photography and you're wondering what lenses you ought to have and you're feeling depressed, despondent and just mind boggled at the expense of decent lenses, then don't worry, don't be put off. Hopefully this video will help you. And I'm talking here about lenses to use with full frame cameras like this 5D Mark II that I've got. With so many people now switching from DSLRs to mirrorless systems, DSLRs and the lenses that go with them are now ridiculously cheap. So as I've said in previous videos, when this camera body was new, this would have cost about £3,500. When this lens was new, it would have cost about £1,200. I bought the body for £500 about 2 years ago, and I bought the lens for £300 around about the same time. So you don't have to spend a massive amount on lenses. So the two types of lens that you should get, okay? So you need two zoom lenses. You need one that zooms from a wide angle to a mid-focal length. So this one is a 24 to 70 millimeter lens. A very common lens as well is the 24 to 105, which I've also got. That's a superb lens, and you can get those for around about 300 quid too. And that's the Canon L lens. The other lens that I frequently use is this Tamron 70 to 300, and that's the other lens you need. You need a telephoto lens. Most common lens that people buy is the 70 to 200. The Canon one, if you get the f4 lens, you can get for under £500. This one, which I think is equally as good, I used to have the 70 to 200, the f2.8, which is a really expensive lens, and the image quality and sharpness was no better than this. Now, you could open that up to a wider aperture, so if you're a portrait shooter or you do weddings or things like that, it's perfect for that. But for landscape photography, you don't need f2.8. I rarely shoot with an aperture any wider than f11. On the rare occasions that I do, then I've got this lens, which is an f2.8, which I can get close into a subject if I want to get a really blurred background. But for all of the purposes, this lens is fantastic. It's really sharp. The image quality is excellent. It's a lot lighter than the Canon lens is. The build quality is pretty good. It's got great autofocus. It's got image stabilization, and you can pick these up for less than 200 quid in mint condition. I got this boxed, mint condition, hardly ever used, £190. So don't despair, you can get lenses relatively cheap. It sounds like a lot of money though, doesn't it? 200 quid for that, 300 quid for that, it's 500 quid, isn't it? Still a lot. But compared to £2,000 for a new telephoto, a Canon one, and £1,000 for a 24-70 f2.8, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? Anyway, I'm going to now shut up, find some compositions, and I'm going to find one that suits this lens and another one that suits this lens to show you just how good these two lenses are. And if you watch my channel regularly, you already know how good these lenses are because I use them all the time. Okay, I've found a beautiful composition here which is perfectly suited for the 70-300 telephoto lens. And also, as well as talking about lenses, I'm going to teach you some game about how to deal with this harsh light. Now, if you're doing woodland photography and you're out in the woods on a day like today where you've got really strong sunshine and it's quite harsh and you've got lots of really nasty shadows all over the floor, which we've got here, then don't shoot anything that shows the floor. That's simple enough, isn't it? Did I just think of that? Did I invent that, or is that just kind of common knowledge? It's probably common knowledge, isn't it? Yeah. So, find compositions that don't have to include the floor. That way, especially if you catch the sun fairly early where the trees have been sidelit rather than directly above, which is really nasty, then you can take advantage of that really nice side light without having to deal with all the horrible shadows that are cast on the floor. So, let's have a look at this composition, shall we? Okay, so I'm having to shade this camera from the sun a little bit. So I'm not going to be able to use my fingers to point at the screen, because if I do, that happens. Okay, so it's a beautiful tree with a kind of Y in it in the foreground, and part of it has got the bark stripped away, which has exposed the bare wood underneath, and you can see the grain and the notches and everything in the oak. So that's what initially drew me to it. And then as you go through the image, you've got all those other branches and tree limbs behind it, that give it some nice depth. So I'm shooting at f11, as you can see there, ISO 100, and that's giving me a 13th of a second. Now you're probably wondering, why has he got his ISO set to 100 when he normally has it set to 50? Well, somebody raised that on one of my recent videos and asked whether or not I'd be better off shooting at the camera's native ISO, which is 100, and whether or not that would give me better image quality. So that's what I'm going to do today in order to put that to the test, to see whether or not the images on this camera look better at ISO 100. Now I've just increased my shutter speed to 1/25th of a second to underexpose. 1/20th actually, that was a little bit too much. So I'm going to take it again and show it to you now. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, that's the wrong button, I'm going to drop the ISO to 50, and then I'm going to shoot the same image. So by dropping the ISO to 50, that's now giving me an 1/8 of a second, so that I end up with the same exposure on my light meter. Now what I'll do, I'll put both those raw files up so that you can see if there's any difference. And I'll zoom right close in and then back out, and we'll see if there's any difference. And I'm going to have a quick look at them on the back of here, just to have a look. Okay, so that is beautifully sharp. This is the one at ISO 50 I'm looking at now. Beautifully sharp, lots of detail, no noise. Now let's look at the previous image. This one was shot at ISO 100. I can't see any difference. Nope. Don't look any different to me. But I'm going to shoot all my images today at ISO 100. But just to see what happens. So let's take this again. 13th of a second, ISO 100. Let's just zoom into that. See what it looks like. Yep, it looks beautiful. But I don't see any noticeable difference from shooting at ISO 50. I suppose once I get it on the computer screen, I can blow it up really big. I'll be able to see if there's any noticeable difference. My next composition is perfectly suited for the 24 to 70mm lens. Now, we've got some harsh light issues to deal with that I was talking about earlier. So what I've tried to do is minimize as much as possible how much of the floor that I'm getting in the shot. Now, this tree that's right beside me here is casting shadows onto the tree that I want to shoot, because the sun is directly behind me there, and there's not a cloud to be seen anywhere. It's completely, even on the horizon, there's nothing. Perfect blue sky. So this is a challenge, to say the least. Now, most of the sky that's sort of in my image is, if you like, obliterated by the background trees. They're acting as a kind of a haze, if you like, to stop those harsh highlights coming through too much. What I might do to just enhance that effect is open up my aperture to f5. So because the tree itself's not that deep and it's kind of spreading out that way rather than like that, if you get what I mean from my arm movements, get what I'm saying? It stretches across the frame rather than that way deep into the frame. So I don't need a massive amount of depth of field to make sure that it's sharp. So f5 should do it. Now, that'll give me a shutter speed of 125th of a second in this really strong light. And again, I've got my ISO set at 100 just to see whether or not that's going to make any difference. So I'm going to focus on the middle of the tree trunk, right on some of that that kind of that green fungus that grows on it. Now I'm not going to underexpose too much, as otherwise, if I go too contrasty in this harsh light, that will enhance the shadows, and we don't want to do that. So it might even be worth overexposing a little bit, just to blow that out slightly. Not too much though. That's the highlights at the top of the frame will look awful. So 2-second timer, take that image, and there we go. Now let's just zoom in, make sure that everything is sharp, and I can see straight away that shooting at f5 has given me a little bit of fall off in the background, whilst the main subject has remained nice and sharp. Okay, so that's two images there that show the versatility of both of those lenses. So I would suggest, if you're setting up in landscape photography, the two lenses that you need are a wide angle to mid focal length, like a 24 to 70 or a 24 to 105, and then you're going to need a telephoto, so a 70 to 200 or a 70 to 300. Like this one, not like this one, like the one in my bag. will suit you just fine, and you'll probably find that the vast majority of the compositions and images that you want to take will fall inside of those focal lengths. I really have no use for a really wide angle lens like a 16mm because most of what I do is in woodland, and if I want to do wide vistas, then 24mm is usually enough. And the type of photography I do, I don't really need to zoom in any further than 200, 300mm max. It's very rare that I zoom that 300mm lens all the way into 300mm. Most of the time it sits somewhere between 100 and maybe 200. Don't despair. You can get decent lenses without breaking the bank, and they will be all the lenses that you need. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope the audio turned out okay this time. I hope the information I gave you about the lenses was useful, and the information about shooting in this really harsh light conditions was helpful. Please give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't done already, and I'll see you in the next video.